anytime you deal with addiction, whether it's your loved one or an addiction that you're suffering with yourself, fear oftentimes starts being the root of all decisions that we make, and shame, right? Fear and shame. It's so important for a father that is maybe suffering with alcoholism or addiction themselves, or sees the pattern in their home. Really begins with a humbled heart and more courage than probably they've ever had in their whole life, and to begin to make decisions for the people in their home, um, that is going to impact their children moving forward for the rest of their life. I think if there's a father out there today listening and wondering how they can positively change or impact how addiction is manifesting in their home, the most important thing that they need to do is become humble and courageous.
Welcome to the Daughter Podcast, where fathers become everyday heroes in their daughters' lives. Grow, evolve, and lead with love. Here's your host, Oscar Pina.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Daughter Podcast. Oscar here, your fellow growing girl dad, back again for another great episode for you guys. And today I have a special guest, someone who brings not just professional wisdom, but personal experience, and one that is very complex, and that is in the conversation of addiction. Today, my guest is Jennifer Chase, and she has graciously agreed to come on and just give us some of her story and her experience, and how that will make a big difference for fathers in their families with their daughters. So, Jennifer, thank you so much for being here with us. How are you today?
I am so great. I'm so excited to be here.
I am very excited. I was talking to you about this before we hit record. And I mean, your story is one, right? Like, it's incredible. Just everything that you have gone through to get to where you are now, which is now helping people
Yeah.
families get through these very, very complex issues like addiction.
Yeah.
And so, as we've mentioned many times on the show before, I love the perspectives that my guests bring, because this is something that I could have a conversation with a buddy and I'd be like, yeah, I don't know, bro, just, go see a doctor or something.
Yeah.
But that doesn't help. And I know that that's kind of our lane, right? Like, we don't want to give random bad advice, and we don't want to say something that we don't know anything about. And that's what makes this so incredibly helpful, is to get stories in here and to bring perspectives that fathers out there can take and go implement into their families. And so that's why you're here, and that's why the daughter community is here. So before we get started, Jennifer, give us a little bit of your background. Tell us about your incredible story, and then, get into a little bit of the work that you're doing.
Yeah. So I am the youngest of three children. I grew up in my dad was a successful businessman, and I had a great life right from the outside
Okay.
looking in. I had all of the things that people would think a great childhood involved, with the exception of I am at least the fourth generation. My parents both have four generations that I have been able to find down both of their sides of the family
Mhm.
that have alcoholism. And
Okay.
my grandma was an opiate addict before, in the like 50s, before that was kind of a thing to be. But
Mm.
for the most part, my family dynamic has always been filled with addiction and
Wow.
alcoholism. And unfortunately, I'm part of a statistic that says one out of every four little girl and one out of every six little boy that's kind of raised in that dynamic of addiction is being sexually abused. And I was being sexually
Mm.
abused by my mom's dad. So growing up, there was this dichotomy of you have a great life,
Mm.
right? I was raised mostly, I was born in the 70s and lived in the 80s, where we didn't have cell phones, and we, tell time based on when the street lights popped on. And,
Right.
we had a great life, except for the dichotomy of what was going on in my home.
Mm.
And one of the things I think that's most important about me was that was never going to be me. Like, I saw my parents and their parents and the generations before them inability to break the chains of addiction as pure weakness. Like
Mm.
I had more courage in my pinky finger than they had in their entire bodies. And that was never going to be me. But unfortunately, in 2003, I was diagnosed with a hemorrhaging brain tumor.
Oh, wow.
And when they removed the tumor, they caused nerve damage, which led me on my path to chronic pain, which led me on my path to opiates. And so I too was the fifth generation of dealing with
Wow.
substance abuse and the trials and tribulations that came with that. And then unfortunately, when my son was a senior in high school, I found out that I had inadvertently become his drug dealer, and he too was addicted to substance. Um, and so the perspective that you speak about of why this is so important to me is I have the vast perspective, right? I have the
Mhm.
perspective of not only a grandchild, but my dad was an alcoholic, and then me struggling with addiction myself, and then walking through that with my son.
Mm.
I understand better than I wish I did about how
Right.
generational impact happens in addicted families. And, fathers are a huge part of that. And
Mm.
even in my family, where my husband wasn't the one using substance, but if you were sitting here, I'd say the same thing. He is the best enabler on the planet, right?
Mm.
And I was the one taking the substance, but he was the one that helped me sort of maintain status quo through all of those years
Right.
of using substance. And so I think it's such an important perspective to look at as like how as fathers and human beings really, but your podcast is about fathers, how do we either contribute to the solution of this thing or
Mhm.
continue to contribute to old sort of narratives that we've learned through experience and education doesn't really serve our families anymore.
Yeah. You mentioned your husband as an enabler. I assume it's an inadvertent enabler, right?
Yeah, it's so he grew up also with an alcoholic dad
Okay.
and was probably a bit of a mama's boy growing up. So had really the perspective of how that dynamic affected
Yeah.
her and their family. And even though before his dad passed, they were really able to um heal that relationship.
Mhm.
Uh, he watched his mom, right, kind of make everything okay. And in
Mm.
my situation, it was difficult because I had this medical condition
Mhm.
that was legitimate, right?
Yeah.
I've been to the Mayo Clinic. I've done all of these things to try to come up with a solution to the medical condition.
Mhm.
And so that enabled him because he loves me,
Of course.
to try to make it easier and better. What he didn't know for so long was that that medical condition had turned into an addiction, or I'm sorry, the medical condition had turned into an addiction.
Right.
And it wasn't until we were pretty far down,
Yeah.
14 years of this, that he realized that he was impacting it pretty greatly.
Wow, what a weight to carry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before we get into a lot of the other stuff, I mentioned to you a little bit before, one thing that I don't have a perspective on, and respectfully, I'll say, luckily, I don't have a perspective on that addiction side. One thing that I do have a view of is how, I don't know if the word is easy, but how easy it could one can get to that.
Mhm.
Give you a perfect example. I had a major back surgery in 2017, and recovery is surgery recovery. You're just dealing with, you got a little bit of the pain up front, and then you got to start doing physical therapy, so on and so forth. You can go down the line. I remember I was on the heavy stuff, and I remember I got to a point, and I can't tell you why, and it may have been something my wife said, but I would be sitting still, not moving, didn't change my position, didn't change the effort my muscles were making, and I would start to be in pain,
Mm.
right? And initially, I would just, oh, it's time for the meds. Let's go get the
Yeah.
meds. Pop them in. Well, when I started to kind of question it, I'm like, wait a minute. There's no reason, if you really think about how this process works, there's no real reason this far out of surgery and not putting in any effort where that should trigger any pain.
Mhm.
So I started questioning that, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start timing this. And sure enough, so I would take the medication, and all of a sudden, I could have sworn it was a 6 hour mark. Like the 6 hour mark, give or take 5 minutes,
Yeah.
my body will start telling me, hey, you need this thing.
Yeah.
And it for me, it got to a point where I actually became scared of the medication,
Mhm.
right? The feeling of needing it, the
Yeah.
feeling that my body would get, the intense sensation that I needed to put it in there so that I could be in a normal state,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And I remember distinctly telling my wife, I'm like, I can see how this road gets taken very, very easily for a legitimate reason initially, as you mentioned, but how it takes a real hard right turn at some point.
Yeah, and I started using opiates in 2003, right, which is in the height of sort of
Mm,
the epidemic, if you will. And you know, I think that I shared earlier, like I was never going to become an alcoholic,
right.
but here I was given medication that a doctor was prescribing me and saying, "Oh no, this is fine. You should be, you're feeling pain. It's
Mhm.
fine if you take this every, however often I tell you." And so there was, I share this with people. I had been about 2 weeks out of surgery, and I was in my room in my bed by myself, and I could hear my family out there playing. We were kind of a no rules, like you could throw balls and play baseball and whatever in my house, right? And I could hear them playing. And I said out loud, as though there were another 10 people sitting there, like, where the hell has this been my whole life? Like in
Wow.
that moment, I was 29 at the time, and
Mhm.
it felt like the first time that I could fit in my skin. It felt like the first time that I could breathe. It
Yeah.
felt like I didn't care that I had just almost died, or that I had been abused, or that my dad, like, I didn't care in that moment. It was the first time that I was okay. And I share that with people because oftentimes when you don't struggle with addiction yourself and you
Mhm.
don't understand what it feels like substance was never the problem. Substance has always been the solution to the problem.
Right.
Right. And so in that moment, I share that moment because in that moment, I found my solution,
Mm,
and it was being prescribed to me legally.
right.
The doctor said, "Yeah, it makes perfect sense that you need this."
It was
And
good for you.
yeah, yes, right. Um, and they believed it so much they kept prescribing it, which told me that it was okay, right, in a
Right.
lot of ways. But if I'm being honest, I knew there was a problem in that moment. Like I feel like that moment was the last time that I had really any control over the substance that I was
Yeah.
taking. Like when I had determined that this was the solution to all of it, I was so already, and that was like 2 weeks, right? And so I had brain surgery in January. My husband had ACL surgery in January, and he doesn't like meds. So he gave me his. And then I had ACL surgery in March.
Mm,
And so by the end of the surgeries, I was already so deep into
mm.
this, but nobody knew,
Yeah.
right? Nobody knew. And I kept the secret, and I finally, 29 years into my life, felt like I finally fit in my skin.
Wow. That we're gonna get into some of that. What I will say is that, and this is a shameless plug for the podcast sponsor, and the reason they're the sponsor is that in that time, and I say this, I want to bring this up because you mentioned your husband in a healthful thought process filled that gap,
Yeah.
right? He fills the gap because he cares for you, and it's like,
Yes.
well, you obviously need it, right?
Yes.
And so he fills the gap. In in the process that I was going through, when I finally realized that there was just something that was off, and in here I sit too as I listen to you, I can easily think like how quickly, instead of thinking this is kind of scary, how quickly it would have been like this works really well,
Mhm.
right? Like it's like two different. It's just a fork in the road
Yep.
at that point. What changed it for me, uh, or at least a big factor was that it was an Instagram post.
Mm.
Never seen it before, and it said, "Comfort is a slow death. Prefer pain." That's what it said. And I
Amen.
remember I remember sitting there and just thinking, what? That just hit me. And I said, what does that mean? And I went back to it. And then I couldn't find it. And you have to search to see who put it on there because I wasn't paying attention who put it on
Yeah.
there. Couldn't find it for a few days. I'm still taking medication, not happy with myself about it. Like this whole thing wasn't feeling right to me. And then it popped up again. And then this time I saved it and it was Few Will Hunt.
Mm.
And their whole mantra is, everybody wants to eat, but only a few will hunt, meaning not everybody's willing to do the work. But their biggest thing was comfort is a slow death, prefer pain. And it's obviously people can take it however they want, but they're not saying go break your leg and just walk
Right.
around. Like, but
Right.
but in that moment, I thought, well, maybe I can do this without this thing. Maybe it'll be painful for a few days,
Mhm.
but maybe I'll move forward. And it was a true game changer at that very moment to at least get the brain thinking about that fork.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I would have thought much about that fork. I would have got there, and what are humans like?
Yes.
Easiest point from
Reward. Yeah.
easiest line from A to B, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So the easy
Well,
one
our
would have
brains
been
are wired that way. Yeah.
right,
Yes.
absolutely. And who
Yeah.
likes to be in
For
pain? I
comfort.
mean, right? It's not something that we desire to do. I mean, I
Yeah.
think I think scientifically our bodies are trying to keep us away from that.
Yeah.
And so it was just I just think of that as you're talking where you got the gap filled. What if something like that? Just something to trigger the mind to think something different. Now, again, that's just a thought. It's not, there's no judgment. It's
Well,
just
no, and
thinking.
I love it because I think about generationally from emotional standpoint, not even such physical pain, right?
Yeah,
I think one of the reasons, if I can just share a little bit about what I know about my dad and even my grandfather that
of course,
abused me.
of course.
So my grandfather that abused me had a twin brother, and they both abused children. So you
Mhm.
have to put some dots together
Right.
that would suggest that they also were abused as children, right? And then I look at my dad, and my dad had a brutal father, brutal father, right? Um, and so oftentimes, I think generationally, we think to ourselves, well, like I wasn't as bad as he was, right? I wasn't as
Right.
bad as my dad, and he wasn't even close. I mean, my dad was a gold star dad in comparison to his dad,
Right. Right.
right? And so I look at this and you wonder generationally how addiction and trauma really play a role in your family. And it's what you just spoke to is it's like in order to untangle this ball of trauma and experiences,
Mhm.
right? The only way we learn how to do that, the only coping skill we have is substance. And so the idea of I'm going to stop using substance, I still have this ball.
Yeah.
I still have this thing, and I have to figure out one by one string how to untangle this ball in order to heal this family. And it is so incredibly exhausting and
Mhm.
overwhelming to even think about it. If it doesn't even feel safe, right? It doesn't even feel even imaginable. And especially in past generations, specifically with men, we justified behavior, right? We just said, "Oh,
Mhm.
well, they're just men being men," or
Right.
like, "Oh, they provide for their family so they can do whatever they want to do," or, you know, and so there was no need to start untangling this ball.
Mhm.
There was just this coping skill of life that I had, and I think about that even from my grandfather's perspective, and I have real empathy and compassion for that,
Mhm.
right? Um, I know how much I didn't wanna repeat generational cycles, and I have to believe at least my dad felt the same way.
Right.
Um, and like I said, my dad was 16 times the father that he had as a father.
Mhm.
But the problem was it wasn't enough necessarily for me, even though my dad was my guy, right? I think I
Right.
said this to you some time ago. Like, if
Mhm.
there was one person on this planet that I'm going to war with and I know loves me, it was my dad. Um, and again, that brings in some complexities when he was an
Right.
alcoholic, because there was some misunderstanding, right? You never
Yeah.
knew who he was going to be. And
Yeah.
so when he was drunk and maybe not so nice, I took that as it being personal, that I was the problem,
Mm,
rather than identifying, especially as a child, what was going on. Um, but it wasn't enough for me. And
mhm.
I had a hard time saying that for a long, long time because my dad was my guy and I never wanted to hurt him, or I
For
never
sure.
wanted to, like, for people not to think he was like, there was always a caveat,
Yeah.
right? Like, but he was great, but he loved
Yeah.
me, right?
Yeah.
Um, and the truth is, it wasn't enough. It wasn't the childhood that I needed, and it wasn't just him, right? Like, obviously, there was the abuse, and there was
Right.
always a feeling that my mom didn't protect me from some things that I should have been protected from, and
Yeah.
so there was a lot of things going on, but that relationship with my dad, has always been the most impactful. I will never forget as long as I live. I think I was 12 or 13,
Mhm.
and I did a fairly, what I think is a fairly normal 12 or 13 thing to do. And I told my mom that I hated her before I went to school.
Mm,
And I got home from school and my dad was waiting for me and very, very, very angry.
mhm,
And I experienced some physical abuse that day.
mm.
And it has stayed with me forever because I this he was everything to me,
Right.
and I wasn't everything to him.
Right.
Right? That's how it felt in that moment.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm not everything to you. And I think if I were to tell dads that are listening to me that are maybe struggling right now, is like, I know it's hard. I've done it.
Yeah.
I've gotten sober. I've unwound the ball of yarn, if you
Right.
will, without substance. And I will never be one that talks about, oh, this is easy or anybody can
Yeah.
do it, or it's hard. It's really, really hard. But this is what I know. We have a responsibility when we become parents to do everything that we can, right? And that takes more courage in areas that we don't think there's courage,
Right.
right? Dealing with things that we thought would once kill us,
Mm,
that we do because we love our children. And this is one of those times, which is, you are impacting generations right now based on how we are parenting these babies. And look, I just told you I became my son's drug dealer.
right.
Right? I
Right.
just I just told you I inadvertently became my son's drug dealer. So this isn't certainly a point of judgment, but rather a point of experience. And if I were to be able to go back and either one, have it, my dad died from this disease in 2015, and so
Mm,
he's been gone for a decade now. But if I could talk to him now from my sober perspective, I would say, I see you, right? I
mhm.
see why you use substance,
Yeah.
and I have great empathy and compassion for that. But I need you to know that it's impacting generations to come.
Yeah. One thing that I say all the time on the show is that I am never going to or have ever talked from a pulpit.
Uh-uh.
I'm talking from the trench, right? Like
Yes,
I'm digging,
100%.
and
I
that's
like them in
exactly
the trenches.
yeah,
You
exactly.
know?
That's exactly where you're at. Absolutely.
Yeah,
You talked about the ball, the ball that needs to be untied.
yeah,
I assume that that ball being untied is breaking that
yeah,
generational
yeah.
problem,
Yep,
right?
yep.
And I can, I mean, um, I untie my daughter's necklaces, the little
Mhm.
metal ones when
Yes,
that happens,
yes,
and it drives me up the wall and is
yep,
not easy. And it takes a lot of finesse and
yes,
it takes a lot of patience
yes.
and almost almost no force,
Mm,
which is weird to say, right?
mhm.
When we're looking at the wounds that you're talking about,
Yeah,
right? The wounds that I want to believe that many fathers don't realize that they're leaving with their
mhm,
daughters,
mhm.
that I'm sure I've done at some
Yes,
point. If you're looking at that ball, that's all the wounds and all the things that he had in his past. Obviously, he did better, but
mhm.
he didn't undo the ball all the way. So I assume there was some strings that were pulled and some ripped, probably stayed in there. And I always see that as like here, Jennifer, it's your ball now,
Yeah.
is because you didn't take care of it before,
Yeah.
right?
Yo, it's absolutely true. And not only was it my ball, but then and then I passed it on to my son and
Yeah,
said, "Sorry, I didn't get this done.
yeah.
I'm gonna need to give it to you," right? And I think ultimately, I've been sober for about 8.5 years now, and that is exactly what propels me through hard days
Mm,
because, I didn't have the courage or the patience to sit there day after day, right? And unlike the necklace of your daughters, this ball has all these emotions and experiences
yeah,
and traumas and PTSDs and triggers and core beliefs about myself,
right.
right? I think that that's one of the most challenging is growing up. I began a core belief about myself was that I'm not lovable.
Mm,
And I had a million reasons of why I could show you that that's true,
right.
right? I looked for evidence from the world and the world gave me evidence, is how I
Mm,
felt. And so part of untangling that ball is dealing with this past narrative or this past belief about myself and determining A, do I still believe that? And B, if I don't, what the hell do I do with that information?
yeah.
Right? And so I do think it's interesting, and we have passed this ball of yarn. And I think what happens is we get some of it undone and we
Mhm.
pass it on to the next generation, and the next generation adds to it. And so it gets bigger again. And then we do a little bit of unwinding and then we pass it on to the next generation and it gets big again, right? And I look at my dad. I desperately wish that he had been able to come to some point of peace and healing before
Mhm.
he passed on from this disease because in all of my heart my dad was 6'5". Sorry, this is making me emotional. My dad
No.
was 6'5", big dude. When you
Yeah,
walked into the room, you knew that he was there. Successful businessman. Like my dad was that guy, and I think that persona, that thing that he was
yeah,
kept him so often from really doing the healing in the long
yeah,
run. You know,
yeah,
he was in the army and he was a college basketball player and
right.
all of the things. And I think all of those things that he presented at kept him away from sort of this softer healing
Yeah.
side. And I just wish more than anything, I wasn't sober when my dad died.
Mhm.
So neither of us were sober when he died. But I so desperately wish that we would have been able to have a real heart to heart conversation about why both of us ultimately had chosen substance as a solution
Right.
and um the pain that kind of made that decision what it was.
Yeah. In your thoughts, what would have been one thing, couple things that your dad could have done? So what you just mentioned, what you're saying is ego, right? Like
Yeah.
in many times in what I know of addiction, the addiction can take over to where even if you want to, right? The ego alone or your reputation or what have you
Yeah.
is what it is, at least in your brain. I believe that ball is going to get carried, or excuse me, it's going to pass along. I look at all sorts of things that can go into that ball, and you mentioned, you might move a string, but that string may make you stop working on the ball because that string was full of X and Z and what have you. When you think back now, especially with your experience, what could your dad had have done that not necessarily may have prevented you from getting into addiction? We'll say alcoholism. Obviously, the narcotics were a product of a situation.
Yeah.
However, we know that there's addictive personalities. There's all these different things.
I for sure had the biology. Yeah.
But when you're looking at, let's just say the alcoholism side, right? Your dad used it as a solution.
Mhm.
Is there anything that he could have done while he was alive to try to break the cycle with you? Not necessarily like, "Hey, I'm gonna stop," but maybe like, I don't know. I think of like I saw my dad try to stop. He went to AA. He did
Mm.
right. Like, was there a try? Was there
Uh,
was
I
did
think
he
when you
show you effort into
Yeah.
that?
So when you asked me the question, what could he have done? I think I was going to answer the question kind of what you're saying, which is
Sorry.
no. I I wish he had done anything.
Mm,
Acknowledge, right? My dad was in the hospital. He died in 2015. He was in the hospital in 2014, and I was with him in the hospital. And to make a very long story short, he was bleeding, and I'm sorry, he was clotting. He was
mm,
had blood clots. So they would put him on thinners, and they would send him home, and he would drink on these thinners, and then just about bleed out. Okay, that's the scenario that we were going through. So I was in the hospital with him after one of these episodes, and um, he lived in a completely different state than I did. And I said, Dad, I'm not leaving here until I notify the doctors that you're an alcoholic.
mm.
And he looked right at me and said, you need to change your flight. And I said, I will. I'll head out of here this afternoon, but not until I tell the doctors that you're an alcoholic. And up even until that day, my dad never said to me, I'm an alcoholic. Never said to me, I drink too much. Never, ever. And I think that would have gone a long ways, which
Yeah,
is, can we at least talk about this elephant in the room?
yeah.
Generational elephant, right? Um,
Wow.
can we talk about, again, and some of this has to do with generations and some of those things that have happened, but um, it was never talked about, and I think that that would have been a huge help for me to hear him soften a bit, to at
Right.
least me. Like, you don't have to soften to the world, but if you could just soften to me and say, I know that I drink too much, and I know that there's a problem, and I don't know what I'm gonna do about it yet, but I just want you to acknowledge, I just want to acknowledge that I know that it's a thing.
Right. Almost to give you the permission
Yeah.
to do the same.
Yeah, and it felt like I or we were the crazy ones.
Mm,
Right? It was never spoken about. It was obviously everybody knew about it, but nobody spoke about it. We certainly didn't speak to him about it.
yeah.
Um, and so, I share with families now as I work with them, like the first thing we need to do when we're healing as a family of addiction is take the elephant out of the room and
Mm,
talk about it as though we have diabetes rather than suffering with addiction, right? Take the shame out of it, take the embarrassment out of it, in because as a society we do attach shame and moral character to addiction, that so often that becomes the way we handle it within a family.
mhm.
And we've got to take the elephant out of the room. We've got to talk about it as though it's like diabetes or cancer.
Right. Yeah, you imagine if a diabetic was hiding,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, that wouldn't
Yeah.
go very well.
No.
No.
And it didn't increase a it didn't increase their likelihood of being well
Right.
when they're hiding in the shadows about something, right?
Absolutely.
It doesn't preclude like health and wellness and light. It
Yeah.
is darkness and shame and embarrassment and all of the things that I'm trying to walk out of.
Yeah. Wow. As you look forward, right? Your father could have done these things that may have given you permission and or a path
Yeah.
for yourself. You start experiencing this. So again, I just want to point out, you experience it as a daughter, then as a self, then as a mother.
Yes.
Is there things that I mean, you would have the background, but was there signs where you're like, "Oh man, I see this now in my son."
Oh, I mean, we could do a whole podcast just based on that question and my
Wow.
experience being his mama, right? One of the things that I think is the most important to talk about is when we're raising children is, I think oftentimes as parents, I know for sure as a society, and I know for sure as an education system,
Mm,
we kind of push our kids to be this like ideal version of themselves,
right.
right? Like who we think they should be to be good kids and to, have proper manners and all,
Mm.
to let's, God forbid, we got a little ADHD boy. He needs to like be sit and be quiet and do his
Right.
work. And right, we push them into this ideal version of themselves. And the more we push somebody into the ideal version of themselves, they start abandoning and even detesting the authentic version of them.
Mm.
And in between the ideal version and the authentic version is where shame lies,
Hmm.
right? Um, and so looking back at my son, I started to realize when he was in about the second grade that he was an incredible deep feeler,
Okay.
that he felt different. So kind of like a square peg in a round hole.
Okay.
So he was part of the popular kids, if you will, great athlete. You would have never known it from looking from
Mhm.
the outside looking in. But as his mama, I could start telling that he was just feeling different.
Mm.
Um, and that was the fairly early stage of my
Mhm.
own addiction. And then as it went on, obviously our life was more chaotic and he started struggling with mental health, but his parents were just trying to get through life, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and we just thought a lot of the things that we said, oh, he's just a boy or he'll grow out of it, his frontal lobe will heal, whatever we were
Right.
saying about his experience. And so I can't get an exact time out of him because he's a little shady about it, but he was about 14 or 15
Mhm.
when he started smoking weed.
Okay.
And I knew ish. I didn't know like really. It's not like we had conversations about it,
Yeah.
but I suspected based on his friends and kind of what was going on and all the things that was happening. I had no idea that he had become addicted to opiates.
Oh wow.
Um None, not until the day that I figured it all out. Um, but there are so many things that I would do differently. Like
Mhm.
so many things that I did that contributed to this thing going off the rails. I didn't, I was so underprotected as a child that I swung the pendulum clear over to the other side. And my kids didn't have to do anything hard in their whole life because
Mm.
I just came in and steamrolled it and mama bared it and they didn't have to do anything hard. I did it all.
Yeah.
Right. And that was all about me. That
Right.
was about my pain and my childhood. And what I realize now is I did as much damage swinging that pendulum over to
Yeah.
the other side as my parents did on the side that I was on
The
growing
opposite.
up.
Right.
And so there's a lot of things that they never had consequences. I went in and fixed it. So
Mhm.
even when, coaches would come to me and say, "Hey, some of the boys are getting in trouble," I would get him out of it. Uh, you know, I would fix things for him so that he didn't have to, and all of those things I would go back and change and
Right.
can now see. I mean, my son is so much like his mama. If he's listening right now, he's like, quit saying that. I know it. Um, so, he's such a deep feeler. He has so much shame. Like there's so many things that are parallel to his and his in my life. It was crystal clear in hindsight that he could
Wow.
potentially have a problem.
It's got to be extremely frustrating to be able to see those as because you experienced those, right?
Yeah.
And then not see kind of the end of it where you're saying now obviously hindsight's 2020. We know that. And you do the best you can with what you got at the time that you got it. So you're working at it, but man, that is something that I think about a lot as a father. I think about what I'm doing. I told you I was talking to Dr. Emerson on the show, and I made a joke. I was like, seriously, I feel like half of the stuff I do, I'm like, oh, that's therapy. Oh, that's therapy.
Yeah.
Like I'm messing my kids up all day. Um,
Yes.
but I mean, I think it's important for us to think about those things and then try to adjust.
Yep.
You mentioned you wish you would have adjusted earlier,
Yeah.
right?
So
But
much earlier.
and that's essentially the goal of what we're doing here
Yeah.
is to have someone listen and be like, oh, that kind of sounds like me. Let me
Yeah.
figure this out.
Yeah. Well, and I'm a quote girl. So this wall back here has a
Yep,
million different quotes, and I want to share two with you today. Well,
please.
one of them's mine, so it's not really one of them's a Jennifer Chase quote, but the other one is made me think of what you're talking about is by Maya Angelou, which is we do the very best until we know better. And
Mm.
when we know better, we do better. And that quote alone has given me a lot of it's allowed me to love myself, right? And even those past versions of myself, because the truth is, and not only love myself, but love my dad, and even have empathy and compassion for my grandfather, because I do believe generationally, my family has done the very best until they knew better. Unfortunately, some people died, right? My grandfather died without there being any consequences to the horror that he kind of
Mhm.
caused or any of that. But I do believe in a part of me that everybody was doing the very best that they could.
Mhm.
And I know that for sure about myself, right? Like even when I was in the middle of my addiction, it was never um it was I never tried to cause harm.
Mhm.
I did cause harm. So those, I mean, there's discrepancy in that. But it wasn't my intent to cause harm. And my son's a dad now, and I watch him and I giggle a little bit because um, he's going to have those same experiences. Like
Right.
he asked me things like, "Should I be doing this? Should she be doing?" Like all these questions because
Yeah.
I know he wants to do the very best that he can, and like you and I, he probably in this time is going to wish he had done something differently. Um, and that's helped me heal and let go of some of the resentment and anger and
Yep.
hatred, really, a lot of the times. But the second quote is a me quote, and it's this, which is, "Perfection is not required."
Mm.
Now, that sounds really simple. Like, of course, perfection is not required. But for so many of us, we believe that perfection is required of us in order to be liked, loved, seen,
Right.
appreciated, and valued. Like, in order for somebody to love me, I have to be perfect.
Right.
And of course, we are never perfect. And so that makes us fall short of feeling like we are worthy of love and value. And what I learned is it wasn't until I started to allow other people to be short of perfection
Mm.
that I started to allow myself to be short of perfection. So I like to give people this example. If you're in my kitchen and you have a mug in your hand and you drop it
Mhm.
accidentally and it shatters everywhere, and I get mad and angry at you for shattering the mug, then my expectation was perfection from you,
Right.
right? And I'm mad that you weren't perfect. And I've got to ask myself the question, is that who I want to be? Right
Mm.
now, if you walk into my kitchen with a mug in your hand and you slam it on the ground on purpose and break it, then I got beef with you,
Yeah. Right.
right? But those two things are different.
Yeah.
And so I have to ask myself regularly, almost daily, like, was that their intent?
Mm.
Did they mean to cut me off in traffic? Did they mean, right, to like, is that what their intent is? And if the answer is no, then I am expecting perfection from people. And what I found is I had to start giving other people grace before I could start giving myself grace.
Right. I have to go back to both of those quotes, and yours is beautiful, by the way. We're gonna put it on there.
Thank you.
But I'll start with the first one, and you hit on something so important, and that is that we're doing the best with we're we're doing the best that we know until we know better.
Yeah.
I know I'm probably butchering it, but here's the thing, and here's why the Daughter Podcast is here, and here's why you're sitting with us. When we get to the point of knowing we need to do better, and then we don't,
Yeah.
now we have that problem.
Yeah.
And it's not just with addiction; it's being a father, being a parent. When you get to the point, and I know you've heard this because I know I've heard this. It's like that's just the way I am.
Yep.
If you get to the point where you have to say that, you know you got to the point where you need to change.
Yep.
And in order not to change, you just decided
Yep.
this is just who I
That is
am.
a choice,
Yes.
right? And it's a choice in courage. It's a choice in discipline. It's a choice in a decision whether I'm continuing to make decisions out of fear. Like there's a lot of choices that are
Yes.
wrapped in that. And it takes a tremendous amount of courage to say, I'm going to like open this raw nerve up and I'm going to go figure
Sure.
out how to do better. And I think for so many men, specifically, I think women too, but we're talking about men. it's easy to fall back in, well, I provide for my family,
Yeah.
right? Or that's just who I am. Like she knew who she married when she married me, or,
Right.
all of those sort of mindsets. It's easy to fall back in that. But the question is, and it's like, it's not even a question. It's to understand the impact moving forward. Like somebody has to have courage.
Right.
Somebody has to have courage. And it might not have been your father or your grandfather or your mother. Like they might have not chosen courage. But to me, when I got to that point, I was like, I'm not going to be the person that somebody says did not have enough courage
Right.
to change this thing.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the moment that you're talking about, is this split moment, this pause in time where you decide that fear and safety are going to be what your life story is about,
Okay.
or courage and growth.
And I would venture to call it discomfort and
Yeah.
pain,
Yeah. That
right?
is, yes.
And again, if I have to bring it back, I have to bring it back every single time to prefer
Yes.
pain
Yes.
because comfort is going to just leave you where you're at. And here's the thing, going into your second quote, it's our responsibility to grow from that
Yeah.
for our children. They didn't choose to be here. So if you're seriously getting to the point where you're just saying, this is where I stop, I no longer want to mess with this ball of
Yeah.
craziness, then you have given up the growth that you need in order to show up for your daughters, for your sons, for your spouse.
Mhm. Well, and I think too, like if you're, and this is going to say cliche, but I need you to really listen with your heart. Like if you aren't growing, you are dying.
Yeah.
So, I mean, think about it from like a flower perspective or a piece of grass perspective or a, like whatever perspective in the world you need to look at it. The truth is, if you're not growing, you're dying. And so some of us have chose to ride this thing out dying since we were 18 years old.
Mm,
Like legitimately.
absolutely.
And the decision is like, if I'm going to be, because you are right, nothing grows without discomfort. And I think that that's one of the things that we as human beings don't understand is, I think sometimes we think everybody else is living the dream, and we're the only ones experiencing pain and discomfort,
It's
right?
the Instagram highlight reel, right?
It really is. And the truth is, everyone is experiencing pain and discomfort. It's just the difference on how we choose to handle it and deal with it. Um, and again, like I get if people don't want to do the work. I didn't want to do the work for a long time either. Like I understand from a cellular level almost what it feels like to know that you need to deal with this ball of yarn,
Mm,
but being so afraid of what you're going to find when you unravel it.
right.
But if we aren't growing, we are dying. And if I'm being honest with you, like this is hard, right? Being sober, being in recovery, dealing with the difficulties that like I still have to deal with the outcomes of things that I created
Right.
in
Yeah.
my life. I've sat in many of counseling sessions with my children. It's hard. But what is also hard is being an addict. What
Mm,
is also hard is living mediocrely or below who I know I need to be, right? And so, literally, for every single human being, it's a matter of waking up in the morning and asking yourself the question, which hard am I going to choose today?
when are you going to pay for that pain?
Yes.
Now or
Yeah.
later?
Because we're not getting out of this thing without it being hard. One hard moves us to growth and healing, and the other hard moves us to darkness and shit, excuse my language, right? And so literally every single day it's a question of like, which hard am I choosing today? Because we none of us are getting out of this thing without it being hard.
Absolutely. Speaking of the hard, speaking of the discomfort,
Mhm,
for that father who is sitting out there
mhm.
listening and realizing that something's got to change
Yeah.
and looking at their daughter at the same time, what do you tell that dad?
So oftentimes in those situations, we don't want to reach out and do anything else because we feel like it would be selfish. Well, let me say this. You have to find your people. So addiction is the most isolating experience that you will have on the planet. It's I mean, I haven't experienced all experiences on the planet, but it's pretty isolating, right? Addiction. And I think for a man it becomes even more isolating because they don't share their feelings. They don't
Mm,
share their heart. They don't tell their neighbor that they probably have too many beers at night, right? Like it's just all in the brain, right? We don't let it out. Um, and if I'm sitting there looking at my daughter and knowing that something has to change, the number one thing I'm going to do is find my people.
mm,
And I can just speak for myself. My people that I talk about, the people that if my rear end is falling off that I'm going to call are not my husband and are not my children.
mm,
Those are the people that understand what it's like to be in this brain. Those are the people that I don't have to describe my shame to because they understand. Those are the people that I don't have to convince I'm a good person because of the behaviors that I had when I was in the middle of my addiction, because
mm,
they too are that way, right? They're the people that I sit knee to knee with. And when I need somebody, they're there for me. And when they need somebody, I'm there for them. And because we are so used to isolation, it's not a natural progression to go seek
mm,
connection, right? Uh, Oftentimes we have to be closer to the bottom in order to say, fine, I will go seek connection. But
mhm,
if you're looking in your daughter's eyes right now and you know what her childhood is right now is not enough, you got to start finding your people that
mm.
you can sit knee to knee to in your brokenness and see one another. The opposite of addiction is connection.
Gotcha.
And my experience growing up through my recovery process is that yes, I build connection. I built significant more connection, trust, and rapport with my husband and my children. But the connection that I really needed early on was a connection with another alcoholic or addict.
Community is, I think, severely underrated,
Mm,
right? The right community
yep.
where you can go, just like you said, to seek answers you didn't even know you had or you needed to get answered. Um, and I mean, on just the fathering side, I could tell you that once I found community, once this started to grow, it
Mm,
changed the game.
yeah.
So
Well,
absolutely,
and it's modeling. So this is the other thing that I think is so important, especially when we're talking about generations. We got a thing in my family. It's called biology. And I don't know how long I mean, even if somebody didn't use substance, they still have the biology, right?
right,
I work with a lot of religious families they're like, well, nobody's drank for generations, but they have this biology
yeah,
inside of them. So when they have a child that uses, then we're off to the races, right? And so I get to make choices now. Again, it's about choosing hard. Like I can choose if I'm going to model what this is going
mm,
to look like. If they are going to know what this looks like when they are done using substance, then I want to be the version that they look
right,
at and say, okay, I know I can do this because she does it. She did
right,
it. And so every day really even with parenting like I get to decide what I'm modeling for my kids.
mm,
And I want to model vulnerability and communication and honesty
mm,
and the fact that life is hard and I know it's hard and I'm going to model for you what it looks like for me to pull my bootstraps up and do
yep,
hard.
yep,
And I think for dads specifically, like that is what our kids need. They need to be modeled what vulnerability and courage
mm,
and hard looks like. So when it happens to them in their life, they are more prepared and not unprepared.
yep. So true. Literal statement that I've been working on specifically this last month is allowing my daughters to see the
Yeah.
human that I am, right? Because that connection, I'm the guy you're talking about, by the way. Like I'm the inside of my head, don't need to talk to anybody. Like
Ah,
that's me. And so it's definitely easy to see how that can transform a situation with opioids, with alcohol, with whatever in that mindset.
well, and I think when you asked me what did I need from my dad that I didn't get, and I said for him to acknowledge that there was a problem,
Mm,
like what I'm basically saying is I needed my dad to be vulnerable.
yeah.
I needed my dad to be honest. I needed my dad to drop all of that presence about himself in my presence, right? So that I felt seen and he felt seen. I needed that vulnerability.
Mm. It's a vulnerability that we are all working on.
Yeah.
100%. Jennifer, I could probably sit here for another 2 hours. Not gonna do that to you. I I can't thank you enough for getting on here and giving us that perspective that is just so crucial. What our daughters are seeing from us, even without us saying words,
In fact, more by your actions and less by your words.
absolutely.
That's
No,
what's they're learning. Yeah.
it's incredible. Uh, Give us just a little bit of where people can find you, where they can find your work,
Yeah.
and the things that you're getting into nowadays.
Yeah. So my website is www.riseaddictionlc.com. The LC stand for life coaching, riseaddictionlc.com.
Okay.
And so about the first 6 years after I got sober, I worked in the treatment field. I worked in an outpatient program that I absolutely loved. I was part of the executive team there.
Mm.
But because of all of my different hats and experiences I've had in this ride called life, I just kept feeling this pull that I needed to work with the families and I needed to help families untangle these things from a family perspective.
Yeah.
Because what I know is this isn't just about the addict, right? And the addict isn't going to be able to just get sober and
Yeah.
everyone is going to be at peace and live the best life. And so my goal now is to do a couple of things that I spoke about, which is bring community.
Mhm.
Once a week, I do coaching calls with people all over the country. And my goal is to, yes, teach them about how to heal from addiction. But the main priority is to create community
Of course.
and get people, like-minded people together that
Mhm.
maybe they aren't able to go next door and talk to their neighbor. So that's the first thing I do. And then the second thing I do is I just work individually with people, and that can look different based on where somebody is in this journey. It can look like I have a child that is out of control or a
Mhm.
spouse that is out of control, and I'm figuring out how, where do I lovingly detach? What boundaries do I set? What does that look like? That place.
Yeah.
I can also help people when somebody is thriving. If you have a loved one that is thriving, but somehow the codependency is still,
Mm.
playing a front row street in your brain. So it doesn't really depend on where we are as far as the addict goes. It really comes from a family perspective of how do we all heal, right?
Wow.
And if for any listeners that are listening to me, like the addict getting sober is only the very bottom of the pyramid of things that are
Okay.
going to, right? Again, addiction, substance is the problem, not the solution to the problem. And so oftentimes as family, we think they just need to get sober and then get back into line and everything will be okay. And that is the last thing, right? That
Mhm.
needs to happen in true family healing. And so I help families learn, like, not only can they heal for themselves, right, and find the peace and the joy that they deserve, but also how do I continue to contribute to that healing in a manner that's actually going to help my addict heal too.
All the way through, right? Incredible work, Jennifer. This has been an amazing conversation that I know is going to give just power to those that need it, that may not know that they did.
Yeah.
And this is just wonderful. So thank you so much for spending time with the daughter community and for spending time with me.
This has been great. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, it was a pleasure. For you guys out there, all the links will be set below in the show notes so you can find Jennifer. Until the next time, we will see you all later. Hey, if you enjoy the Daughter Podcast, you'll love what we've got waiting for you at daughterpodcast.com. As soon as you visit, you'll be prompted to join our new email newsletter, a resource packed with valuable insights, practical tips, and powerful perspectives straight from our podcast episodes and incredible guests. Don't miss out on the chance to join the community and strengthen your journey as a father. Visit daughterpodcast.com today and subscribe, because great dads never stop growing.